Hello everyone and welcome to the IFST webinar, What is Natural About Food Colours, organised by IFST's Midland branch. My name is Andy Carriage. I am a food safety consultant and former chair of the Midlands branch. This evening we're going to hear about the sourcing of natural colours, some practical challenges in their application. The webinar is being recorded, and as well as being sent to each participant by email, it will also be uploaded to IFST's webinar hub for members. Feel free to make comments and ask questions throughout the webinar using the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. You can also upvote other people's questions by clicking the like button next to their question. And when we get to the Q&A session, part of the presentation, the most popular, if you like, voted questions will be asked first. As I mentioned, there will be a Q&A session after the presentation where we'll respond to as many of these questions as possible. And that section, or part of the session, will be led by Alice Jones, who is the IFST Midlands branch chair. However, our speaker today is Dr. Kendrick, a fellow of the IFST and Senior Technology and Innovation Manager, DDW, the Colour House. He has over 25 years experience of natural colours in technical and customer-facing roles, so absolutely the right person to talk about natural colours this evening. For more information on our speaker's biography, please look on the IFST website. And with that, I will hand over to you, Andrew. Thank you very much. Fine.
Thank you very much. So, as Andy said, I work in natural food colours, have done for many years, started off as a microbial biochemist, and I think the fundamentals of science and chemistry has stood me in very good stead. I currently work for a company called DDW, a private company with global headquarters in America, and established in 1865 in New York, primarily to supply burnt sugars to the brewing industry. Since then, we've become a world leader in natural colours and colouring foods. And another day, another time, I could talk about caramel colours, but tonight I'm going to focus on natural food colours and the so-called colouring foods. There will be some pictures when I pull things from the marketplace. Just to stress, these are not products I've got direct experience of or worked on, but they're ones that I've seen and have chosen just to illustrate some points. So already I've used a couple of terms, natural colours and colouring foods. And unlike flavours, for natural colours, there is no legal definition. There are some conventions, and the Natural Colour Trade Association has a nice position paper on it. And the convention is traditionally from a natural source and not chemically modified. And one of the common misconceptions about natural colours is they do have E numbers, or the subset do, and we'll see later a little bit more about that. The fact that they have additive status and E numbers means they're very strictly controlled about where they can be used and at what levels. So some of the more restricted pigments, such as annatto, which will be a very popular, vibrant orange colours in things such as red Leicester cheese, because of regulatory constraints, would not be seen as often in things like confectionery or beverages in the EU. However, in markets such as America, they can be used much more freely. And we'll have a little look at global regulations later. Because there is no legal definition of a natural colour, if you look at packaging in the supermarkets, and if you come shopping with me, I'm an absolute nightmare because I spend so much time looking at products and labels. You'll see that most have the terminology free from artificial colours or no artificial colours, which is a much more defensible, safer label to use. Increasingly popular are the so-called colouring foods. So these are ingredients that still deliver color, and they're outside of the additive regulations. The most popular ones you'll see are the vibrant clear yellow color safflower in some beverages, the blue pigment spirulina, and both of those are not additive colors, only coloring foods. And then you have pigments which can be colors and natural colors, but also can exist outside. Paprika, the orange color, the vibrant lemon yellow color, curcumin, and beetroot, depending on how the raw material is used and processed, can effectively be E number 3 colors. Generally, coloring foods are weaker. You generally have fewer shade options and often more restrictions on sub-ingredients than can be used, such as antioxidants, to preserve the color. And generally, these are under more regulatory pressure from European bodies. There's no direct threats at the moment, but as a direction of travel, long term, these will be under more pressure. If you look at various papers on colors and why people like color, this was a great one that came out a few years ago now that looked at the origin of color perception in food. And it found that the preference for colors in humans was effectively inversely proportional to how food decomposes and decays. So we are genetically and through sort of natural selection and breeding conditioned to like foods that are going to be healthy for us and good, and to stay away from the ones that could harm us. And one of the things I really enjoy about my role is I can produce as many graphs for people, as many bits of statistics about how this color is performing. But the moment you do it to someone, there is an instant feeling and appeal. And it's that working with that inbuilt reaction to a color that really interests and excites me, along with delivering a stable color that will perform in sort of bulk food processing through the supply chain and onto the supermarket shelf to be used by the final consumer. The last of the papers sort of that really appealed to me, this one came out from the UBS a few years ago, and had a couple of great statements in it. One is about the importance of food, and I think everyone involved in food technology, great quote, "Food is life, producing it has reshaped the planet, and even more than ever what we've seen in the last few years, whole economies and national security depend on it." And then a few pages on, and for someone that works in natural colors, where the perception is we probably just squash a few carrots at the back of the factory, that we need to bust the lingering myth that technology is the enemy of natural, abundant, affordable food. So sort of two quotes that really resonated with me. One of the key parts of the role that I do and the people that work with me is we have to describe and discuss colors with people in a way that we can really work out what we need to deliver. If the first thing we've submitted hasn't quite worked, why not? And I do a reasonable amount of university outreach. I go and talk to students and do presentations like this. And this is sort of a great icebreaker of how you would describe orange to a blind person. And it gets people thinking about, okay, how are we going to discuss colors when somebody rings up and asks for a red? And it's when you start to think about what does orange really mean, the emotion behind it, because that's what we're going to try and convey with the colors. And for orange is usually described as refreshing, sweet, tropical. The sun is orange. Many orange food need the sun to grow. So it's the communication of color which will enable us to deliver something that is very impactful to the final customer. And if we were doing this face-to-face tonight, what I would do is I'd ask everyone to bring in a bottle of strawberry milk from the supermarket. And before we would open them and look at them, everyone would have a perception of what that strawberry milk would look like. And I went down the supermarket a couple of years ago now and bought every one of the strawberry milks that I could find. And the selection that I got starts to show why the role that I have is so fascinating to me. So a series of strawberry milks. I haven't been involved in any of these. I'm just trying to put myself in the position of the people that designed them. So roughly a similar range of shades, some obvious differences. And if we start looking at the one on the left, and then the one in a little bit fridge. So both are using beetroot. Beetroot is a very cost-effective pigment, comes from the same salad vegetable that you use at home, normally grown in great fields in Brittany, northern France. They are slightly bigger than the ones that you would see in the supermarket, a bit more misshapen. Simple process, washed, cut, squashed, color is concentrated, and you get a wonderful water-soluble, almost Barbie pink color. The drawback about beetroot is that it is not heat stable. So if you pasteurize beetroot, relatively low temperature, chill store milk, the beetroot will probably last for about 4 or 5 or 6 days. Beyond that, it will start fading off and it will start going brown. So beetroot's got a lovely sort of consumer story. It's lovely and natural, and it would fit in these circumstances. If we're now going to a situation where we need UHT processing, and a few examples there, beetroot will go brown. And if we were to, and we had chance, I'd put some beetroot in some milk, we could put it in a microwave. In a few minutes, it would come out brown. So the option there is carmine. Either carmine, named there as carmine, or it's by its E number, E120. So carmine, when I started doing natural colors all those years ago, was probably the go-to red color. But over a number of years, it's under more and more pressure. It is from an insect source. So not vegetarian, not kosher, not halal. It does, however, have fantastic stability properties. And the other issue with carmine is its first pigment that comes out of the insect, the cochineal insect, is orange, bright orange. And in order to make it more red, it is complexed with aluminium. So you have an aluminium chelate that drives the reaction to make it a more red color. But if you're looking for a UHT stable red, then carmine will be the option to go. And in this case, E120, carmine, nice and red. And the E153 here is the E number for vegetable carbon or carbon black to make, a more purpley color. If in the case here, there's a sterilization reaction, a sterilization process, even carmine will not give you a red color. It will not survive the process. And the best option there would be a beta carotene. Originally, the pigment first isolated from carrots, hence the name carotene, the whole carotenoid family, much more stable, traditionally a very orange color in emulsion form. And if you go into a supermarket and you look at the orange drinks on one side, red drinks on the other, the orange drinks would all be colored with carotene. If you don't, however, has it an emulsion, have it in a more stable crystalline form, you could have it as a more pinky red. And under these conditions where you have the extreme heat processing, that's the option you need. So from starting off, what would be a pink color? What for strawberry? Once you start looking at the processing conditions that's required, the shelf life storage, the final shade, from an initial very broad palette, you then narrow down to a very few options that you can offer. And although my role is to help sell colors, the one at the end really appealed to me. It had a pink straw, which I managed to lose before I took the picture. It had the biggest strawberry flavor, the biggest strawberry aroma, but because point of consumption, the product would never be seen, there was no need for any color. So no color was added. So from a simple, what is strawberry, all of a sudden, these are the things you would need to consider. And natural colors are typically produced by the source, fruit or vegetable, to protect from sunlight. And if you look at where we source our materials, typically from South America, across Africa, India, into China, all the very tropical regions where these highly structured color molecules, lots of conjugated double bonds to protect the host organism from light abuse, which as a color chemist then gives me a series of challenges, because they are naturally designed to fade and give their life to protect the host vegetable. So when you take them out, you put them in a food system, they are inherently unstable, which is why all the different strategies and challenges can come in to try and protect them, to make them stable for food and vegetable applications, so food and drink applications. And for all the colors we saw in the previous slide, that is probably 2/3 of the ones that we offer. And for each of them, there will be a calendar that we have. I apologize, I dropped off the months at the bottom, but January on the left, all the way through to December at the end. And this one is for the beetroot that we mentioned earlier. And for all of the pigments, we would have a similar one, and we've just gone through where we would need to forecast. So January this year, we forecast our beetroot demand effectively for 2024, taking into account projects, orders, forecasts, everything like that. During this time, the people we talk to will go and contract the fields, get the seeds. There'll be a growing phase, autumn time, harvested, processed, available for sale 2024. Globally, when we look at climatic conditions and sourcing, if at any point we have a summer that's too hot, we have a spring that is too wet, the beetroot harvest could be poor. It could even fail, as it has done some years, and we'll be left in a shortage situation. Most years, there'll be one of the pigments that we are struggling to obtain because of something that has gone wrong in a growing region. There are different things that we can do by holding longer stocks, knowing how to switch people to other products. And I'm very conscious when I watch television and I see climate change and disasters where you've got flooding, wildfires, etc. Most of those will then have a knock-on effect on the raw materials that we have, that we then use to make the natural food colors for customers. And also, if there is a new launch comes along that we're not aware of, or a customer really ramps up, often we would love to supply the final product. But once, in the case of beetroot, it's been sowed, grown, harvested and processed, there is no more available. So that's another challenge that we have, to get the forecast exactly right across all the pigments. If we had longer together, I could do lots of examples like this, but all the colors that we offer have many features and benefits. And it's the sort of the experience of working with them and formulating them to make sure that we offer the right ones for the right situations. So if you buy any pack of lemon sweets, boiled sweets, they will have the pigment in called curcumin. Curcumin is a vibrant lemon yellow pigment extracted from the turmeric root. And if you take any of the yellow sweets out of the pack, put them on your windowsill, I doubt they'll fade. You need light and free water to drive the fading reaction. If, however, you put some in some water, leave it on a windowsill, within 48 hours it will have faded. So for all the pigments that we offer, it's the knowledge of how they decay, what they need through the processing that will ensure we use the right ones for the right applications, and also early engagement with our customers to try and help them choose the right ones as well. Sort of no talk on colours would be complete without talking about some legislation. We are still following EFSA, even though we're now outside of Europe. And one of the challenges that we face is that there is no harmonized global legislation. So working with customers in different countries, we're often aware of their local legislation and help them through it. If you're working with a major food group that might have an R&D center in Europe supplying the world, often we have to ask very specific questions to understand the final market of sale. And if there are multiple ones, to ensure that we work across the multiple different regulatory platforms. And I mentioned E-numbers earlier. And for each of the pigments that would have a so-called E-number, there is a purity criteria set out for each. And there's a link at the bottom that should take you to the full set of regulations. But what it means is the raw materials that I purchase, that I can use in any of the final products, it's very specific about where it can be extracted from, going down to the Latin name of the raw material. So even if somebody has something similar or chemically the same, but from a different source, the necessary toxicological testing will not have been done to demonstrate its safety. And the whole E-number approval system is around guaranteeing the safety. So at the top, where it can be extracted from and how, there is always then a section about the purity of the color, the strength it needs to go to, and there is always a section on impurities. These will be a mixture of solvent residues for any of the extraction solvents to make sure none are left over. But then also if there is something very specific about the process, to make sure if there is a potentially harmful minor subcomponent, that is kept to a very low level. So everything to do with E-numbers is to do with safety. And years ago, I was a lot more on the road, sort of traveling, technical sales roles. And I could spend the first half of the week in Western Europe when people saw E-numbers as problems, too many additives in foods, we need them to be removed. And then if I went to, say, Eastern Europe, they were very much seen as a badge of quality, more of an understanding of what they were about. And then I think we're all aware of the book E for Additives and all the scare stories. And I think that has driven a lot of the move, and some of the things that you see in the book probably taken out of context, but E-numbers and the purity criteria around them really underpins the safety of our business. And again, just looking at some of the labels that you see and the choices that people would have to make. So I picked this up, took a photograph on the back of a chocolate bar, and you can imagine that how this label is put together. It's got some very nice products in there. It's got some milk powder, it's got glucose, it's got rice flour, it's got milk, so it's lactose, but 2 E-numbers are listed, one for color and one for emulsifier. And I always find it's interesting when you see the mix of E-numbers and words. So in this case, the 2 E-numbers have got quite unpleasant looking names to the uneducated, and especially the copper complexes of chlorophyllin. Anything with an X in tends to be a no-no. So it's very interesting how people then design their labels from either using the E numbers or the words. And then when we start looking at US legislation, this is a well-known product, picked it up. First thing you'll see, the colors that have used, all described as the names. So we have red color anthocyanins, beetroot red we talked about, copper chlorophyllin, which is sourced from grass, curcumin from, as we said, turmeric, lutein, which is from a marigold petal, which gives you a lovely egg yellow color. And then the final one on there is paprika. And paprika is orange color from the sweet red pepper, selectively pulling out the color, leaving the bulk of the flavor behind. But as it stands at the moment, lutein and copper chlorophyllin are not legally permitted in the US, and the way anthocyanins are regulated in the US is very different. So when we start looking, as I said before, at trying to design food and color systems for different territories, that's when you can get some interesting choices to make sure we make it suitable for the final destination market. And then doing quite a bit of work with American customers and looking to how they can then move across from synthetic colors to natural colors. And this is just one example that you see of Starburst with two versions. The version in the in Europe and the UK compares with the US version, which is still very heavily dominating with synthetic colors. And then to finish off a little bit, it's a case in point of something that we observed going on about 10 years ago. There was a lot of publicity around a product in America, a Starbucks product, and lots of, I think probably quite unfair publicity about the use of cochineal and carmine, and lots of unhelpful things about calling it bug juice. And we've mentioned carmine a few times in the past. So carmine is the red color that you would extract from the cochineal insect. Top left-hand corner, said insect. And when the insects, the females, become pregnant, they produce lots of dye inside the body. The one in the top middle is pregnant female insect, so the wings fall off. So when people go in to pick them off cacti, the non-pregnant insects fly off, the remaining insects are picked and used to extract carminic acid. Carminic acid at the bottom, very complicated molecule, and it's only when you put aluminium in the center that you get the nice red color. And along at the same time, when there was all the adverse publicity around carmine, there were lots of things on the internet going around really pushing some very unhealthy and unhelpful publicity extracted from female cochineal insect. 70,000 killed to produce a pound of dye, where it's commonly found, other names for it. And it also drove at the time a lot of effort to remove carmine from food products. Now, won't go through this slide in detail, but I'm always very conscious when there is a trend in colors about moving away from one towards another. There is often a whole community around the production of a particular pigment. And carmine grows mostly in Peru, on cacti, about 50% wild harvest, 50% in plantation. Lots of cacti per hectare, and The picture just above the 30 days one is like a sort of bamboo type cartridge of cochineal insects that are used to seed the cacti. And then like a waxy cuticle develops over time, from which the insects are harvested and then dried, and then the pigment is extracted. So even though there might be a big move away from carmine, I'm always very respectful of the impact that this might then have on one of the communities that is used to produce it. So the choices that a company like Starbucks would have. So in the particular product that they were making, it was a strawberry frappuccino made up with a bit of theatre in front of the consumer. So it was a low pH strawberry syrup diluted with milk and mixed up. So the requirement was for a colour, red colour, and a red colour that will be stable at low pH, but also give you the same red colour at neutral pH. First colour that was considered was beetroot, the one we spoke about earlier, often seen in dairy products, in ice creams. Now, the problem with beetroot, as we said before, it doesn't have the heat stability. So if you're looking for a mass production of a low pH syrup, made in big batches, transported around a country, it would not have the stability to deliver. The next colour that I would imagine they would have looked at would have been the class of colours called anthocyanins. So anthocyanins are the colours that give you the reds in fruits and vegetables. Classically, you would extract these days from black carrots, picture across on the right. Carrots were originally black in Europe, but were selectively bred to be orange to celebrate William of Orange coming to power. And the trend of orange carrots swished across Europe. So only a small area of Turkey kept black carrots going in the cultivation. And they are now one of the major sources for anthocyanins that you'll see in beverages, confectionery, anywhere where you need a low pH red. And this was the problem, I guess, that they would have had in this situation, where you've got a low pH red syrup. This would be perfect. But when you put it into the milk and mix it, the pH change would turn the anthocyanins more of a mauve color. And if you had a very low quality one, it could even cause a precipitation. So anthocyanins will only give you a red color at low pH. And in fact, when we were at school and we used universal indicator or even litmus paper is impregnated with anthocyanins. So only would you get a red at low pH. So the final solution, and the one they eventually went with, was a pigment called lycopene, which is the pigment from tomatoes. The challenge of lycopene is if anyone's cooked a tomato at home, it will start off a great, vibrant red color. But then as you cook, it'll go more of an orange color. So lycopene crystals in the tomato skin reflect and refract the light to give you a red color. When you cook them, they dissolve in the tomato fats and you get the orange color. So in order to have a successful lycopene color, you require a dispersion of lycopene crystals. And it's that creation of the stable crystals dispersion that enabled Starbucks to move away from carmine to lycopene, that would then give them stable red color, low pH syrup, heat stable, that you could make in bulk products, ship round to the food service operations, that when you then diluted down in milk will still give the nice red colour. And that is my last slide. If I could hand over to Alice, I'm happy to take any questions.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. That's fascinating to kind of be taken in around this world of colours. And I think as well, it's really lovely to see the raw material sourcing pictures, for example, with the cochineal story.
Yes.
They're things that most of us don't get to see. So that's really fascinating. Thank you for that. So we'll move on to the question and answer part of the webinar. So do please put your questions into the question and answer box. I can see some coming in already at the moment, so that's great. And we're getting people to vote as well, which is fantastic. To find out about what they think to their job. So I'm really interested to hear what you find the most challenging and the most interesting parts of your job.
Thank you, Alice. Yes, I always like looking at this in sort of two parts. The first part, I think the most rewarding, is when I look back when I started this job in this industry. You could find so many artificial colors in supermarkets. Now when I have visitors across from different countries, from America, we can go around a supermarket and you'll find virtually none. So it transitions the industry, and another day we can have the debate about whether artificial colors really are bad for you or not. But we've taken a whole industry away. And we've overcome stability, vibrancy, price. And when I mean stability, it's stability in bulk food processing, in supermarket display, and also home. And I think on a rewarding day-to-day basis, the thing I love about my job is we have a relatively small scale where we do lab trials. And from that, it's making sure we've got the fundamental understanding that we can then sell to a customer who will then use a high impact, low dosage ingredient. And I can probably go to any supermarket in the UK and know where it's ended up. And I quite like the idea of hidden technology. Why should people know what's gone on to make that work? But the fact that we do know and it does work, that's what really sort of inspires me, makes me get up every day.
Indeed, yes, yeah, as is the case in lots of parts of food science, actually. Isn't
Yes,
it?
absolutely, yes. And it's also the bits I don't know just happen seamlessly, that I don't know enough about flavors, but I know all that must be going on in the background as well.
Fabulous. Oh, thank you for that. So we've got first question in from the audience. Let's have a look. Get it in the right place. Yes, this is an interesting topical one. Given the current supply challenges that we have for fruit and vegetables at the moment, is that having an impact on you sourcing for natural colours?
I'll be honest, at the moment, no. But our biggest challenge is, say, sub-ingredients. So sunflower oil, we went through a big crisis last year where we had to look for alternative sources as an alternative vegetable oils that we could use. But we are monitoring the current situation in sort of Southern Europe very closely, because it could impact us later in the year. So our purchasing team and our supply chain, have got their eyes open at the moment. But any problems we have now were the ones that had the climatic issue, say, a year ago. So if you ask me a question in a year's time,
of course, yes,
a different answer. Yes.
Fascinating. Yes, so planning ahead is required.
Yes.
There's a really nice specific question here. So somebody asks, E150A plain caramel always seems to cause a debate when it comes to labelling claims. Do you think it's considered natural or not?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I will answer that not as someone from DDW. I'll give you my personal opinion, and I believe it is. If you watch the chefy programs where they burn sugar and they make a caramel, there are no catalysts added. E150A is made in virtually the same way, just at scale and with a lot more control. So my personal opinion would be that it is.
Interesting, yes. And
But
these things are down to interpretation, aren't they?
they absolutely are. And I would recommend, there are two great caramel organizations. There's the European Technical Caramel Association, and there's the International Technical Caramel Association, so UTICA and ITICA, and they both have very good position papers on it. So if you're, yep, and if anyone has problems finding those, I can certainly pass them on to people.
Fabulous, thank you very much. Yes, perhaps the person who asked that might like
Yep,
that.
no problem.
Fantastic. Okay, another one. So talking about fat-soluble colours in chocolates, how can they be stabilised if you want to make them from natural sources, from natural foods?
First, we have to think about legislation, because legally you cannot colour chocolate. However, you can colour a decoration or a coating that goes into the chocolate. I think then, depending which pigment you wish to use, because pH will come into play. So some of the vibrant reds would only require a low pH. So it would be where you would add it in the process. Because if you were looking to do, say, a pink, the best choice is probably beetroot, which is water soluble. So adding it at the right place is key. And I'm happy to pick this up offline with someone as well, because you can often use water soluble colors added to tempered chocolate that's been melted and then added and reformed and reset. But it's not easy, and it can cause all sorts of problems of sort of blooming, and yeah, it's not an easy one, but it is possible. And then often to see the state of the art, some of, especially the Easter egg creations, that will often show you how far you can push adding the natural colors to it. But yeah, not easy. But if you understand the process, understand the color, it is possible.
Right, not easy, but you know the answer.
If
You
not,
might be able to help with applications.
yes. Yep.
Fabulous. So we've got another one here. So about innovations in the field of natural colours. Can you tell anything about sort of what the newest innovations might be at the moment, in terms of the extraction methods you're using or the source materials you're using in the industry?
I think the most innovations at the moment around cost reduction, because that's always a big one. And if you look at some key gaps, so it's very difficult to have a stable red color at neutral pH. So that is a big focus of innovation. And the classic one people always ask for is a natural blue. There are some natural blues. They have stability issues. So if you look at some quite friendly applications like Smarties or other panned confectionery are available, where you've got a neutral pH syrup, some enrobing, and a glaze, a blue will survive there. And if you've got, say, a celebration cake, a blue will survive there. If you're looking at a beverage, you've probably got more challenges with the existing blues. But if you go on LinkedIn, if you go on some of the regulatory websites, there are some very exciting novel blues working through the system at the moment that will address those issues. And when I was talking about US legislation, I said copper chlorophyllin wasn't approved. So there is no natural green approved in the States. When a more robust blue is available, that can be blended with available yellow options in the States, and you will then have a natural green. So whether the blue itself is a big market driver, probably not. But the fact you've then got more options in the US for greens, I think that will be the exciting one.
Wow. Does that mean in the USA that they're using artificial green then at the moment?
They are very much so,
Yeah.
except in some limited applications. Yes.
Interesting. Fascinating.
Yep.
So here's another good one then. Are there any available food colours produced by microbial fermentation? And what is the regulatory status around that?
Great question. Really great question. If we look at carotene, beta carotene, first source was from palm oil. So when I started, palm oil carotene was about the only thing that was available. The palm oil that we purchase for home cooking is quite light in color, and the last stage is a decolorization, and that is used for food colors. Pressure on rainforests and looking after orangutans and things like that, people don't use palm oil carotene anymore. And two other sources came on board. One is from classic deep fermentation using the fungi Blakesii trispora, and the other is from open salt lake ponds in Whyalla in Western Australia. And if anyone can't sleep tonight, go on Google Earth, Whyalla, Western Australia, you'll see these massive salt lakes. All three are natural carotene. All three are E160A, but they all have a different purity criteria and all required independent regulatory review of toxicological data. So coming back to the question, there are some sources, there are even more coming on board, but they would have to be assessed for safety through the normal battery of toxicological testing.
All right. Okay. So probably a new area, an emerging area then, yeah.
Emerging area. And I think if you look at the ethics of, again, this is my personal opinion, not from DDW, of using land for cosmetic ingredients when you could be using it to feeding people, how you justify that against fermentation to make colors, which is probably more ethically the right thing to do. Again, that's my own personal opinion and not DDW's.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, so as the popularity of eating insects as a protein source grows, do you think this will change the view of using carmine as a food colour?
I completely agree. Yes, it will. We have a big kickoff meeting on a Monday morning, and we always bring new things in that have been launched. And over the last 5 or 6 years, I have seen major brands that were very proud of the fact they went carmine free and now going back to carmine. The customers and briefs that specified no carmine are now happy to consider carmine. So I think there is a very strong opinion that it is, it is a good source. And when you look as using insect protein as a way of feeding people, some of the original issues are going away. So I think, yes, absolutely, it will come back.
So trends go around and come around, don't
absolutely,
they?
they do. Yes, yes. Which
That's
is why
fascinating
experience
thoughts,
counts.
yeah.
Which is why experience counts.
Indeed, yes. So here we go. Here's a nice wide open one. What do you predict will be the next big trend in natural colours?
Oh, that is great. I think that it will be fermentation colours. I think there'll be some step change innovations in fermentation colours. There are probably 3 products. I think there'll be a blue and 2 reds that will come on the marketplace in the next 2 to 3 years that will change the way people look at the current sources and what's currently available. And then I think it's going to change the supply chain. The slide that I had about forecasting and growing and worrying about climatic conditions, that will change. And I think it will also give you the opportunity of having effectively raw material production very close to where you need it, rather than taking it of where nature currently has it. So I think in 5 years that will completely change things.
And with people starting to put sustainability stamps and carbon footprints on things,
absolutely.
Then,
yes, yeah, really agree, Alice.
That's going to really grab attention, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
So here's another specific one, asking, why are carrots and tomatoes not included in the colouring food categories?
That's a good question. So colouring foods, traditionally you would have to say that you take a whole extract of the colour of the vegetable and you do no selective extraction. There is an enrichment factor where the colour relative to, say, other nutritive components are not enriched by more than a factor of 6. So for tomatoes, where you've got the colour in the skin, you cannot do a whole extract of the tomato and get a vibrant colour, because you'd only need to use the lycopene crystals from the skin. Hesitated originally before I answered, because there are some carrot colouring foods out there. And if you look at the orange Fanta product, that's coloured with a mixture of carrot and pumpkin. Most of the colour comes from carrot as a colouring food, where it is a whole extract and it's quite a fine dispersion. If you extracted the carotene from the carrots with some solvents or some oil, then that would be a colour. But it is possible to have a colouring food carrot.
Perfect. Okay, thank you very much. I think that does answer that one. That's great. And so we've probably got time for about one more. So I think this is a really nice one to wrap up on. And of course, we will be able to ask you some questions on an email, because Andrew, you've very kindly said that if people want to ask you more questions, then we'll put your email address up on the screen a little bit later on. So yes, don't worry if you don't get your question asked. You can ask it to Andrew. He's very kindly will answer. So the final question, what has been the most challenging project that you have worked on with natural colours, and how did you overcome it?
Wow. I would say it was a beverage project that I did. It was for a Danish customer, and we thought we had great communication, but we obviously didn't. And we had to solve the same problem about 3 different times as we went from their lab, when they added the colour to the finished beverage and everything was great. We then went to a pilot plant setup when we didn't know how they then put a beverage together in the pilot plant, which effectively meant mixing the colour and the flavour together as a premix that split everything out. But we didn't find out until about 6 weeks later, when it went horribly wrong. And then they had a completely different set of way of putting the beverage together in production. And then when we got that stabilized, all of a sudden the beverages started fading. The decision had been made to move from DI water to borehole water, which had a low level of pro-oxidant metals, which destroyed the color. So every time we worked through it, but it was just one of those from the get-go, that there was just another challenge and another challenge, and each time it was a different team within the company that did it, and we were like starting again with a whole new set of friends and to overcome. But yes, I don't want to do that one again.
But of course you learn so much, don't you, from ones that go
absolutely.
like that. Yeah.
Yes. And it's always pleasing when they ring you again when they've got a problem, that you did half a decent job the first time.
Absolutely. And that example, I suppose, kind of demonstrates the fact that there are so many factors to consider when choosing which colour. And that's why it's important that we have people like you in the industry to bounce our ideas off and ask questions of and get the application support from.
Yes, absolutely. And the good thing about doing colours is you get involved straight away, whether it's your fault or not. the colour will fade, it will ring, it will drop out. Any precipitate will pick the colour up on the way down. So we're the first people call.
Fantastic. Well, we're glad that we've got you to call upon.
Thank you very much.
Great. So I think we better wrap it up now. So thank you very much to everybody for attending. Big thanks to Andrew for your time and for that really interesting talk. If we didn't manage to answer your questions, then we are going to put a slide up. Yes, it's up now. So this is Andrew's contact details, and he will very kindly answer your questions, I am sure. So we will also be sharing a recording of this webinar, and it will include the question and answer session as well. And that will go out on an email to everyone that's attended today. And if you are a member, you can also access it through the webinar hub as well.